we're going to review macros in Roll20. I do want to put out a general Roll20 Pathfinder 2e guide, or at least snippets of the parts that make up that, but I really wanted to make sure to get the macro piece done, as I really think that this could be really helpful for a lot of people's online games, help to make them move faster, make the most of your playtime, and also they're genuinely fun to use. So the first question we should figure out is, what is a macro? What is the purpose of a macro? So in the top right of your Roll20 screen, you'll see that there are a number of different buttons that correspond to different functions. So you have the chat, you have art library, journal, compendium, jukebox, and collection. And it's under this collection button where you'll actually find the macros tool. So what the macro is essentially allowing you to put a command into a button so that when you click that button, it executes all the commands of that. So you don't have to constantly type it in every single time. So for example, normally without a macro, if I were to type something in and I didn't have a button for it, I would say, let's roll 1d20 plus 6. And with that, I would get my result. But what we need to look at is how can we automate that process so that's a lot faster. Now, one way to do this is when you go to the macro section, you can press add, and you can name the macro whatever you like. So perhaps I just want one that says roll 1d20 plus 6. So I will just name it that for the sake of ease right now. And what I need to do is input into the macro exactly what I want the program to do when I click the button. So if I press /roll, which is the command, and then I input 1d20 plus 6, then when I press the button, it'll actually do this for me. Now, there's something called token actions, which I won't go over yet, because there's a much simpler way to do this to align it with your character's character sheets, so we're going to bypass that for now. You can press the test macro button to make sure that it works, and lo and behold, it rolled 1d20 plus 6 with no issues. Now, another thing is that sometimes when you're making macros for players, you want multiple players to be able to use it. So under this visible to player option, you can put whoever else you want to be able to see and use this macro, and it will appear in their collection tab, just like how it will appear here once we save the macro. For now, I only have myself in this test game, but I'll just put all players anyway, and we'll save the changes. So now I can go to the collection screen and click the little dice here, and if we go back to the chat, we'll see that 1d20 plus 6 is rolled again. So great, I've simplified this into a click, but wait, there's more. So the other part of this is that there's something called the macro quick bar, which to enable, you need to click show macro quick bar, and when you do that, a small little gray bar will show up at the bottom left, and in order to put your macro into here, you just have to click in bar next to the macro that you want. Now, when I click this button in this bar, you can see that it's done exactly what we want it to, which is rolling 1d20 plus 6. Great. Okay, but how do we take this even further? So, as I mentioned before, there are different ways that you can input commands into this, because essentially the button is just executing whatever you tell it to do. So you don't necessarily need to name your commands so literally, and also you don't need to always input it in terms of /roll. If I go to macros and click add over here, let's say I want to use a macro for my homebrew system where my players are regenerating action points, so I'm going to call the action focus. And as you'll notice, it doesn't have any of the details of what they're actually doing. Another way to input rolled values is with 2 square brackets like this, then the command, and 2 closed square brackets. So I can actually type out a sentence if I want, rather than putting /roll into the command, and I can say, you regain 1d6 action points. And we can give that a test. And as you'll see, the number is actually already rolled for me using this alternate method of inputting in the roll. So if we save changes to that, and let's make it available to all players as before, that's also another draggable and also clickable macro that I can put in the bar by configuring it this way and clicking the in bar button. The focus macro is now there, and so now my players, if I tell them, like, say this is a universal mechanic and I've made it so that all of them can see this and use this macro, I can say, okay, just roll your focus check, and then they'll go to the focus button, click it, and then now they know how many action points that they're regaining. So it's a really useful tool as well if you're running homebrew systems, or just you need global macros that will that are involved in game mechanics. You can create these and share them with your players for use, and they don't even need to be called what the macro is actually doing, because it's rolling 1d6 and giving us this text, but I've called it focus because that's what I want to call it in universe as the ability. Now let's consider some macro bar powers that are unique to Pathfinder 2e. So if I open up the character sheet in Roll20, let's take a look at my character. Let's just say, since I like playing monk a lot, let's just make them a monk. And you'll notice that everything on this character sheet is a button already. For example, like if I want to roll fortitude, I just click the fortitude button, and you'll see that, wow, nat 20. But you'll see that the fortitude roll is already done for me by virtue of just clicking this button. What's great about this is that you can actually drag these buttons to your macro bar, so that you don't always have to open your character sheet and try to find the right page on any of these. You can just go directly to the checks that you make all the time. So if I'm a monk, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be punching a lot with flurry of blows. So I'm going to drag my unarmed fist attack or whatever style attack that I have into here, and then it's going to come out with this, quite strange label just because of the way that the character sheet is coded. But if I right click and click rename, I could just make it unarmed strike 1. And if you'll notice, when I click the unarmed fist button here, and I also click unarmed strike 1, it's doing the same command as it was before. So you're getting the actions of the character sheet, but now embedded in this handy bar, which is great, because then all the games that I've played with Pathfinder 2e, even with new players, this is really helpful because they can just focus on seeing more of the screen and more of the game rather than having to work with their character sheet all the time. And they can put the most common checks that they make too. So, for example, if I'm playing monk, I'm probably going to want to use athletics. So I can drag this down to the macro quick bar, and you'll see it says PW's character, athletics. Now I can just rename that by right-clicking and typing in athletics. And you'll see that the macro bar grows bigger as you add more things to it. You can reposition these by moving to the right side of the macro until you see the crosshairs, holding it, and then dragging it left and right. If you want to get rid of a macro, like we don't need our roll 1d20 plus 6 anymore, you just have to basically fling it out of the bar into the ether, and then it goes away. The other things that you want to consider doing is maybe there's some feats that you need, or there's certain save DCs that you want to know. Like, let's say one of my feats is Stunning Fist. Let me see if I can actually pull this up from the compendium. Great. So if you go to the character sheet, it says Stunning Fist, and the save is going to be my class DC. Now, maybe I just want to make sure that I recall that, or I can bring up the rules for my GM. So what I might do is take this and put it in my macro bar, and even though the DC isn't there, I can look back to my character sheet and, I haven't put anything in here, but my class DC is 10, but I can right-click this and then just say Stunning Fist, DC 10. And now whenever, the GM needs to ask for me to bring up my feat or look at the rules, I have it right here, especially when I'm going to be using Flurry of Blows and using this ability a lot. So in the same manner that the attack and the fortitude, reflex, and will saves can all be brought down to this bar, you can do the same thing with anything else on this sheet that's a button, which is super helpful, especially when there's a number of different feats, or there might be some favorite spells that you're using. At the end of the day, once you are able to get all of your important stuff in the macro bar, you don't need to go into the character sheet as much, and it'll make all of your moves a lot faster for yourself and for the rest of your table. I found that we've gotten so much more out of our game time after we've started implementing these macros. So I really wanted to get the word out there, in case you're not doing this, you might want to really consider it, because I found that it's really helpful. To give you a really good example of this, let me show you a game where I did set this up and it was really helpful. So I'm just going to go back out, and I had permission from the players and the GM to use this game as a template to take a look. But this was a game that I played recently where I played a Sylph Catfolk Monk. And as you can see, at the bottom, I have a number of different buttons related to things that I would commonly use and commonly needed to look up the rules for. So, my Dragon Tail and Arm Strike is right there. My Fort, Reflex, and Will saves. Perception. Not one, but anyway. Nice athletics score, though. But you get the idea. When you know what you're doing a lot in the game, and what buttons you'll be pressing frequently, it just saves so much time rather than having to click the journal, open the character sheet, go to the character sheet, find the right subheading, and then pick exactly what you need. Now, a couple of things that I also wanted to mention was that, when you add a number of different macros to the character sheet, or from the character sheet rather, you might find that your macro bar is getting a bit crowded. So I'm just going to throw a bunch into there, and you'll see that it extends more than just the screen width. So to deal with this, you can actually drag, make this wider, or what you can do is just use the secondary bar up here to drag and look through everything. But I find a lot of times that the custom naming that they give to the macro button is longer than it should be. So for example, this used to say, actually I'll just show you by example. So I'm going to take my fort save away, and then if I put my fort save into the bar here, it says Nefu Silvara, fort. Well, it's I already know my character's name, so I'm just going to rename it fort. And I already saved so much space. So there's actually a way to fit a lot of different commands onto this, and sometimes pretty much the main part of your character's chassis, if you will, onto the macro bar without barely having to go to the character sheet, unless it's something that you don't roll often and that your GM asks for. Now, these macros are already built into the character sheet, so it's not like I needed to go into the bar here and make all of these on my own. But if there ever was anything custom that I wanted to do, let's say, for example, in one of my games, my character, one of my player characters has a bag of weasels, and they want to roll for weaselification. So even as a player, because I don't have the GM role here, I can still make a weaselification roll for myself. So I can just input roll 1d20. And then I can test the macro. And this won't really interfere with anything that any of the other characters are doing. It doesn't add to their macro bar. You can see as a player, I don't have the option to share this macro with other players. So it just ends up as my own personal macro that I can also put in my bar. And if I look to the end of my bar, it should appear. Yep, there it is. So there's two ways of using macros in Pathfinder 2e. There's creating your own. You can also use it for homebrew things, but you can also drag the macros from the character sheet, the buttons into the macro bar, and it makes playing and everything else a whole lot more streamlined and a lot of fun. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to write a comment or message me, and I'll be happy to get back to you. All right, thanks everybody. If you have any feedback on the video as well, let me know. and then I will just make sure that we patch up the videos for next time. All right, thanks very much and take care. Bye.